Hi, I'm Anna. I've been with Rob for quite a while now. We met in college, got married soon after, and have been together for 15 years. Life with Rob was generally peaceful. We lived in a decent house, had good jobs, and shared a bunch of common interests. But there was always something missing: a child. You see, we tried for years to get pregnant. We visited doctors, tried different treatments, and even considered adoption, but nothing worked. As time went on, the strain of our childless reality began to pull at our once strong bond. Arguments became frequent, and the future started to look a bit gloomy. But then one day, something changed. It was a regular Wednesday morning. I woke up feeling a little queasy. Thinking it was something I ate, I brushed it off. But then I remembered. I had missed my period. Could it be? I quickly rummaged through the bathroom cupboard and found a leftover pregnancy test from years ago. Without wasting a moment, I used it, waiting for the result. The result felt like the longest 3 minutes of my life. When I finally dared to look, it was positive. My heart raced. We were pregnant. The joy, the excitement, the fear, it all rushed in. I had to tell Rob. He was in the living room, engrossed in some paperwork. Taking a deep breath, I walked up to him, the test still in my hand. "Rob," I began, trying to keep my voice steady. "I'm pregnant." He looked up, his expression unreadable. Then he said, "Are you sure? I mean, at this age, is it even safe?" I was taken aback. This wasn't the reaction I was expecting. "I took the test, Rob. It's positive," I said, trying to reassure him. He sighed. "Anna, you know how hard it's been. And now, at 37, do you know the risks?" I felt a sting of hurt. "I thought you'd be happy," I whispered. "I am, I'm worried about you, about us," he replied, his voice softening a bit. "We've waited so long for this, Rob. We can't let fear dictate our happiness now," I countered. He looked down, avoiding my gaze. "Have you considered maybe not going through with it?" he asked. I couldn't believe my ears. "Terminate the pregnancy?" "No, Rob. This might be our only chance." We sat in silence for a while, the weight of our situation pressing down on both of us. I wanted him to be as overjoyed as I was, but at that moment, all I saw in his eyes was fear and uncertainty. That night, as we lay side by side in bed, I held on to hope. Hope that our child would bring us closer again. Hope that our love was strong enough to overcome any challenge, and above all, hope for the future. The next few months were tough. As days turned into weeks, it became clear that this pregnancy wasn't going to be easy. I was often sick, nauseated, and felt exhausted all the time. But each little kick from inside reminded me why it was all worth it. One day, after feeling particularly weak, I collapsed. Thankfully, Rob was home and immediately rushed me to the hospital. As I lay on the cold hospital bed, surrounded by beeping machines, I felt more vulnerable than ever before. "Is she going to be okay?" I heard Rob ask Dr. Mitchell, his voice laced with worry. "She needs rest," Dr. Mitchell replied. "Her body is under a lot of strain due to the pregnancy. It's imperative that she stays relaxed and avoids any stress." That hospital stay was the first of many. Each time I was admitted, I'd watch Rob from the window, pacing back and forth in the hospital corridor, talking on the phone, sometimes even arguing with the billing department. One evening, as I lay in the hospital bed, Rob walked in with a weary look on his face. He looked like he hadn't slept for days. "I met with Dr. Mitchell," he began. "He said we need to consider the possibility of bed rest for the remainder of the pregnancy." I nodded slowly. "If it's best for the baby, I'll do it. Rob sat down next to me, holding my hand. I'm sorry, Anna. I wish I could do more to help. I squeezed his hand. You're here with me, that's more than enough. However, as the days went by, Rob's visits became less frequent. Sometimes he'd call, other times he'd send a text saying he was caught up with work. But the distance between us seemed to be growing. During one of my longer hospital stays, feeling particularly low and missing the comfort of my home, I asked a nurse if I could use the phone to call Rob. It's been 3 days, I said, trying to keep the tremor out of my voice, when he answered, You haven't visited. I know, Anna. It's hard for me seeing you like this, he admitted. Rob, I need you now more than ever, I pleaded. Silence. I'll try to come by tomorrow, he finally said, his voice distant. But tomorrow turned into the day after, and soon a week had passed. Feeling isolated and alone, I confided in my nurse, Lisa. He's probably just scared, she suggested, trying to be comforting. Sometimes when people can't handle situations, they distance themselves. One morning, after a particularly difficult night, Dr. Mitchell came into my room. I think it's time we discuss the birth plan, Anna, he began cautiously. There are some decisions to be made. Rob, despite his absences, was there for that discussion. We sat hand in hand, listening to our options, praying for the strength to make the right choices. Days turned into weeks, and as the date approached, I felt a mix of excitement and apprehension. But I held on to hope, believing that once our child arrived, everything would fall into place. Little did I know, the hardest part of our journey was yet to come. The first moments of holding my daughter Emma in my arms were moments of pure bliss. Her tiny fingers, her soft cooing sounds, it felt like a dream. But that dream was quickly shattered by Dr. Mitchell's grim announcement. Anna, Rob, he began with a heavy sigh, there are some concerns regarding Emma's health. That evening, as I cradled Emma, Rob walked into the room, a storm brewing in his eyes. Anna, he started, his voice shaking. How could you? Giving birth at this age, we knew the risks. Tears welled up in my eyes. Rob, I thought we wanted this. I thought we wanted a family. He was nearly shouting now. You should have considered an abortion. Why bring a child into the world with so many complications because of your selfishness? I was shocked. Rob, she's our daughter. We should be together in this, not pointing fingers. His face was red with anger. I can't believe I'm in this situation. I can't raise a child with potential disabilities. It's not the life I imagined. As the weight of his words sank in, a cold dread filled my heart. So what are you saying, Rob? He hesitated for a moment. I don't think I can do this. I can't be here, not like this. It felt like the floor had been pulled from beneath me. You're abandoning your daughter because she might be different? He looked away, unable to meet my gaze. I just can't handle it, Anna. Devastation turned into determination. Fine. If you're leaving, then leave for good. But you'll have no claim over Emma. He didn't respond. Instead, he turned and walked away, leaving me with our newborn daughter, grappling with the uncertainty of our future. The first few weeks after Rob left were the hardest. The house felt empty, but the silence was deafening, and the reality of being a single mother weighed heavily on me. But every time I looked into Emma's big, innocent eyes, I felt a surge of determination. I was going to make sure she had the best life possible, no matter what it took. My sister Linda was a godsend during this time. She came over often, helping with household chores and looking after Emma so I could rest. One evening, as I was feeding Emma, Linda walked in holding 2 mugs of hot cocoa. "Anna," she began gently, "you need to think about the future. Have you considered finding a place of your own?" I sighed, looking around the home that held so many memories. "I've thought about it, but the thought of leaving this place, it's just hard." Linda took my hand. "I know. But think about Emma. This house will always remind you of Rob and everything that happened. You both deserve a fresh start." She was right. I needed to let go of the past and focus on building a new life for Emma and me. The search for a new place wasn't easy with my limited savings and no job. Options were limited. But then one day, Linda called me excitedly. "Anna, you won't believe what I found. There's a small house for rent in my neighborhood. It's perfect for you and Emma." I went to see the house the very next day. It was a cozy 2-bedroom place with a small garden in the back. The landlord, Mrs. Peterson, was a kind elderly lady who lived next door. "Linda speaks very highly of you," Mrs. Peterson said, smiling warmly. "The place is yours if you want it." I felt tears of gratitude welling up. "Thank you, Mrs. Peterson. This means so much to me." Moving in was hectic, but with Linda's help, we managed. As I set up Emma's room, filling it with toys and her tiny clothes, a sense of peace washed over me. This was our home, our sanctuary. Linda popped her head into the room. "How's it going in here?" I smiled, hugging Emma close. "It's perfect. I can't thank you enough." She hugged us both. "That's what family is for. You're not alone in this, Anna. Remember that." Days turned into weeks, and life began to settle into a new routine. Morning walks with Emma, visits to the local park, and coffee dates with Linda became our new normal. One day, as Emma and I were playing in the garden, Mrs. Peterson walked over, holding a tray of freshly baked cookies. "Thought you two could use a treat," she said, smiling. I smiled back, taking a cookie. "Thank you, Mrs. Peterson. It's delicious." She chuckled. "Call me Ellie." Feels strange being called Mrs. Peterson by my new neighbor. We chatted as Emma giggled and played. Ellie shared stories of her own children, offering advice and wisdom. I felt a connection, a sense of community that had been missing for so long. As the days went by, the pain of the past began to fade. With the support of my sister and new friends like Ellie, I realized that while one chapter of my life had closed, another, even more beautiful one, was just beginning. Emma's first birthday was just around the corner, and I was deep in preparations. Ellie and Linda offered their assistance, suggesting ideas for decorations and games. As the day drew nearer, I found myself reflecting on the whirlwind of the past year. My baby girl, Emma, was blossoming into a bubbly, inquisitive child, her laughter a constant source of joy. One afternoon, as I was laying Emma down for her nap, the phone rang. The sound was sharp and unexpected. "Hello? Hello, Anna?" came the familiar voice. It was Dr. Mitchell. I felt a twinge of anxiety. "Dr. Mitchell, is there a problem?" He hesitated, which only deepened my concern. "Anna, I need you to come to the hospital. There's something about Emma we need to discuss." I felt my heart in my throat. "Is she okay?" His voice was thick with regret. "Please come in. We need to talk face to face." Linda agreed to watch Emma while I rushed to the hospital. The drive felt much longer than it was, my mind racing with worst-case scenarios. Dr. Mitchell greeted me in his office, his usually calm face lined with worry. "Anna, I'm so sorry to call you in this way." My patience was thinning. "What's going on?" Taking a deep breath, he began. "There's been a grave error. The initial test we ran on Emma after her birth got mixed up with another baby's." My confusion grew. Meaning? He met my gaze, his eyes filled with regret. Emma is healthy, Anna. She doesn't have any medical condition. I couldn't express how deeply sorry I am. The weight of his words hit me hard. You mean to tell me I've lived this past year under false assumptions? My life turned upside down because of this? His voice was barely above a whisper. Yes, and it's my responsibility. I can't begin to fathom the pain this has caused. I thought of Rob, of the bitterness and pain this mistake had caused. It's shattered my life. Dr. Mitchell looked defeated. I know words can't change the past, but I'll do everything I can to make it right. I took a moment to collect my thoughts. I need time to process this. Driving home, a mix of relief and fury consumed me. Yet, seeing Emma's joyful face as I walked in grounded me. She was my world, and she was okay. That night, Linda and I sat down, and I relayed everything. She was horrified. Anna, what are you going to do? I looked at Emma, peacefully sleeping. For now, nothing, and I don't want Rob to know. He made his choice. Linda squeezed my hand. You're strong, Anna. Remember, you're not alone in this. In the stillness of the night, I reflected on our journey. Yes, the revelation about Emma's health was bittersweet, but one thing was for sure. I would protect and cherish her regardless of the past. The swift passage of time amazed me. Before I knew it, Emma was already 5 and gearing up for her first day of school. My feelings were a whirlwind of pride, hope, and the natural apprehension of a mother. At breakfast a few days before school, Emma gazed at me, her eyes shimmering with anticipation. Mom, will I be going to school like other kids? I smiled warmly. Yes, sweetie, in just a few days you'll be starting. Her face lit up. Will I find friends there? Will they like me? Touched by her innocence, I assured her. Emma, you're such a lovely girl. Of course they'll adore you. On her first day, dressed in her new school uniform with a pink backpack hanging from her shoulders, Emma paused at the school gates. With a quiver in her voice, she admitted, Mommy, I'm scared. No one will talk to me. I crouched to her eye level. Honey, always remember to be yourself. You're amazing and they'll see that. Just give it some time. Her small hand waved goodbye as she joined the bustling crowd of students. I watched her until she was out of sight, my heart heavy with the typical worries of a parent. A few weeks later, Emma was all excitement and stories about her new friend, Sophia. Their adventures during breaks, their shared love for painting, and their little secrets. One day, she bounced home asking, Mom, can Sophia come over tomorrow? Delighted at her blossoming friendship, I agreed. Absolutely. I'm eager to meet your new buddy. The next afternoon was filled with their giggles and playful shouts. From the corner of my eye, I noticed their genuine bond and thought of how childhood friendships were so pure and uncomplicated. As the sun dipped, a car pulled up. Emma, holding Sophia's hand, led her to the door. To my shock, standing there were Rob and a young woman, presumably his new wife. Emma, inside now, Rob's voice was curt. Sophia, sensing the tension, looked worriedly between her parents and me. Daddy, I had so much fun. Emma's my best friend. Rob's gaze was cold. Sophia, we've talked about this. You shouldn't play with inferior children. His voice dripped with disdain, making it clear whom he referred to. I felt a rush of anger. Before I could retort, the young woman, probably trying to mediate, gently tugged at Sophia's hand. Come, dear, let's go home. Emma stood close to me, her eyes filled with confusion and hurt as the car drove away. Mom, why did he say that? Holding her close, I replied, Sometimes, sweetie, people don't say the nicest things. But always remember, you're wonderful just the way you are. That evening, as I tucked Emma in, I promised myself that no matter what, I'd always protect her from the cruel judgments of the world. Only days after the incident, my phone buzzed with an unknown number. I hesitated, then answered. A woman's voice, soft yet firm, responded. "Hi, this is Emily, Sophia's mother. Can we talk?" Surprised, I replied cautiously. "Of course. What's on your mind?" She hesitated. "I'd rather discuss this face to face. Can we meet tomorrow? There's a cafe around the corner from your house." After a moment, I agreed. "All right, see you at 10 a.m. The next morning, I saw Emily waiting. She looked out of place, her pristine appearance contrasting with the laid-back vibe of the cafe. As I approached, she stood up, offering a polite if slightly forced smile. "Thank you for coming," she began, her eyes searching mine. After the other day, I couldn't shake off a nagging feeling that there's more to the story than Rob's told me. I took a deep breath. I'm not one to spread tales, but since Sophia is involved, I think you should know. She leaned forward, anticipation evident. "Please tell me everything." Over the next hour, I unfolded our past, how Rob and I had struggled with fertility, my unexpected pregnancy, his disinterest, the misdiagnosis, his leaving, and my subsequent journey with Emma. I made sure to be factual, not letting emotion color the narrative. Emily sat stunned. "He never told me any of this. He said you were the one who left him, and he always painted such a rosy picture of your marriage." I shrugged. "Sometimes people craft stories to cope or to hide." She looked defeated. "I feel like such a fool. I thought our love was genuine, but now it seems like he was just replacing one life with another." "Emily," I started, my tone firm, "it's not about him anymore. It's about Sophia and Emma. They formed a bond. I don't want Emma to suffer because of our past." She nodded. "I completely agree. Children shouldn't be dragged into adult disputes." As we parted, I felt a weight lifted. For the first time, I felt like I was truly free from Rob's shadow. Having laid our past bare that evening as Emma played with her toys, she looked up. "Mom, will I see Sophia again?" Smiling, I said, "Yes, sweetie, you will. And always remember, your past doesn't define your future. You do." My phone buzzed on the coffee table, startling me from my thoughts. Rob's name flashed on the screen, a name I hadn't expected to see in a long time. Hesitating for only a moment, I answered. "Anna." Rob's voice was filled with a mix of anger and desperation. "Do you have any idea what you've done?" I frowned, taken aback. "What are you talking about?" His voice grew softer, almost pleading. "Do you have any idea what you've done? Emily left me, she filed for divorce, and she's taken everything. Everything. I've lost almost everything, Anna, and it's all because she spoke to you." I could hardly believe what I was hearing. "Rob, you made your choices." I just told her the truth. There was a heavy pause. "She also told me about Emma, that she's healthy. You never told me. Why would I? After everything you said, after everything you didn't deserve to know," I retorted. Rob's voice grew desperate. "Anna, I made a mistake. I realize that now. I want to be there for Emma. I want to be there for you. We can be a family again." I scoffed in disbelief. "Now that your life's in shambles, you suddenly want us back? You're unbelievable, Rob." "Anna, I know I messed up, but I've changed. Please give me a chance." I could feel anger rising in me. "You walked out on us, Rob. You called our daughter inferior and turned your back. Now that your little fairy tale with Emily has ended, you think you can just waltz back into our lives? Think again. He sounded desperate. Anna, I was wrong. I see that now. Can't you give me another chance? No, I replied firmly. Emma and I have moved on. We're doing just fine without you, and we don't need or want you in our lives. But Anna, it's over, Rob. Goodbye. I ended the call, my heart racing. I took a deep breath, letting the emotions wash over me. Emma and I had each other, and that was all that mattered. I wouldn't let Rob's selfishness disrupt our peace. Whatever challenges lay ahead, we'd face them together.
Hello, Linda. Ken's funeral is about to start. You're not really planning on not coming, are you? Excuse me, what are you talking about? Ken has passed away. You got a call from Marissa yesterday, right? I'm coming to pick you up, so get ready. It's been 3 years since I divorced my husband. Out of the blue, I received a call from my mother-in-law, whom I hadn't been in touch with for years, telling me to attend my ex-husband's funeral. Logically, it makes no sense to invite an ex-wife to her former husband's funeral after several years have passed. But what does she mean by, "You got a call from Marissa"? My ex-husband was supposed to have died a year ago. Happening to be off from work, I, confused and not understanding the situation, got dressed in mourning clothes just in case. 30 minutes later, the doorbell rang insistently. Come on, we're going. It's outrageous not to show up at the funeral of a husband you once relied on, even if you're divorced. That funeral? You mean the first anniversary, right? My mother-in-law frowned. What? The funeral is about to start. Why would it be the first anniversary? Why am I not on the same page with my mother-in-law? A year ago, I was directly informed by Marissa, my ex-husband's current wife, of his passing. My husband passed away. I didn't contact you because I didn't want you to attend the funeral. But since you came to pay your respects, I thought I should let you know. At that time, I put $200 into a condolence envelope I had at home, intending it for incense money, and handed it over. When I mentioned this, my mother-in-law clicked her tongue quietly and furrowed her brows even more deeply. Just get in the car. Where's Alex? I'm not bringing Alex. I don't want him to see. Marissa. Without saying anything more, my mother-in-law put me in the passenger seat and headed straight for the funeral home. With the early passing of my ex-husband as the starting point, I was clueless about what was happening, yet I was being dragged into an unimaginable situation. I'm Linda, 35 years old, a single mother with a 3-year-old son, supported by my parents. I live at home and work as an office worker at a local real estate management company. Now, I find the lively and enjoyable child-rearing at my parents' home fulfilling. But when my husband demanded a divorce 3 years ago, I felt as though my world had ended. Who could have imagined being abandoned right after giving birth, with a newborn in tow? Now, I'm grateful that I was able to start raising my child at my parents' house immediately after being discharged from the hospital, living happily ever since. I met my ex-husband through my aunt's introduction. Linda, there's a wonderful person I think you should meet. My aunt, who's close with my mom, occasionally comes over for chats. Without any preamble, she dropped this suggestion, nearly causing me to spit out my tea in surprise. My aunt runs a small restaurant and is known among her patrons as the matchmaking aunt, having successfully paired off several couples who ended up getting married. There's a relative of a regular customer, a son who's over 35 and still hasn't had any marriage prospects. I had him come to the restaurant once, and I must say he's not only good-looking but also has a great personality. Plus, he works at a major company. It was clear that my aunt was highly recommending him. She first approached me, a single woman past 30, with this proposal. While I wasn't actively seeking a relationship, I was aware of my unremarkable and dull existence. Out of respect for my aunt, I decided to take a leap and go along with her suggestion. On the day, as I headed to the hotel lounge where we agreed to meet, my future husband was already there, waiting. True to my aunt's word, he was a handsome man in a well-fitted suit with a refreshing smile. After exchanging greetings, he asked me with a somewhat serious look, "Do you seriously consider marriage, Linda?" Not fully understanding his intention, I decided to be honest. I'm not against the idea, but to be honest, I came today to honor my aunt's request. Hearing that, my husband let out a relieved sigh and said, "That's good." He was 3 years older than me, not in a rush to get married, and like me, had come to meet out of respect for a relative's wishes. Perhaps freed from the pressure of matchmaking, we both relaxed, and conversation flowed naturally between us. Maybe that was a good sign. It's strange how fate works. 2 people with no initial intention of marrying ended up getting married within a year. From the beginning of our marriage, my husband's work kept him busy, often coming home late at night. I hadn't dreamed of a sweet honeymoon phase, but it felt lonely starting our life together with him, rarely around. I'm sorry it's like this even though we're newlyweds. I believe this is a critical time for me to work hard, so I hope you can bear with it. I'll let you know on the days I can come home, so don't worry about preparing meals for me. Otherwise, I don't have experience working in a large corporation, but according to him, socializing is crucial for advancement. I understand, but don't overdo it, okay? Yeah, thank you. The loneliness I felt during the weekday initially soon became normal, and I found myself getting used to it after just a month. Not having to rush home from work to prepare dinner was a relief. Moreover, my husband made sure to be home on weekends, valuing our time together by going out or dining together. Our relationship with my in-laws was, for better or worse, almost non-existent. You're married and a separate household now, so you two should make your decisions. From our initial greeting, my in-laws were indifferent and never interfered in our affairs. In a way, I think our marriage started off smoothly. Nearly a year into our marriage, I found out I was pregnant. "I'm happy," my husband said, but his demeanor became more distant as days passed. As my pregnancy progressed, he started to spend weekends away from home, leaving me alone more frequently. The severe morning sickness and quitting my job due to the pregnancy were significant factors. "Hey, let's go look at baby stuff soon. We need to start getting ready." I've got something on this weekend. You go ahead, pick whatever you like." Perhaps it was the hormonal changes making me emotionally unstable, but every time he said things like that, I felt a surge of sadness. "Hey, this is your child too. Let's think about this together." "Come on, I'm busy, you know. It's your child too, so you should prepare yourself. You have time during the day, so just go by yourself." Every time I brought up the topic of our child, my husband became increasingly irritable and raised his voice. Even though I realized a gap was forming between us, I felt powerless to do anything about it. Yet at that time, I still believed that the birth of our child would bring about a change in him. When labor started, my husband was nowhere to be found, despite numerous attempts to contact him. There was no response to my calls or messages. I called my mother and then headed to the hospital by taxi, where I safely gave birth to a boy. After waking up, I contacted my husband again, and he said, "Well done. It's pointless for me to be there now, isn't it? Let me know when you're being discharged. I'll come to pick you up." Hearing that provided me with a bit of relief. During my hospital stay, both my parents and my in-laws came to see the baby. taking turns holding him and saying, "He's so cute." Even my usually indifferent in-laws seemed genuinely happy at that moment. Although I was surrounded by happiness, the one person I wished most to be there, my husband, was absent. In the end, my husband never visited the hospital, not even once, and I found myself unable to share my feelings or seek advice from anyone. On the day of discharge, my husband came to pick me up from the hospital room at the time I had told him. As soon as he entered the room, I handed him our sleeping son without a word. For a moment my husband looked surprised, but then silently stared at his face, standing still. "The name's Alex, right? Hoping for a bright future." I was surprised that my husband had thought of a name for our son. I thought it was a good name. Surely everything will be okay. At that moment I couldn't help but believe that a fun and happy future with our baby awaited us. However, my hopes were shattered in an instant. Returning home for the first time in a week, I found a pair of high heels with ribbons I had never seen before at the entrance. Entering the living room, there was a young woman wearing a short dress. "I want a divorce. I've realized I don't want children after all." Without a chance to sit down, my husband said this and thrust divorce papers in front of me. "Why didn't you say something sooner? The child is already born, and why bring me all the way here if you wanted a divorce?" "It can't be helped, right? Marissa said she wanted to meet you and apologize." I felt dizzy hearing my husband say this with a smirk on his face. I thought it might be nice to have a family and make a home for the sake of my career, but when I actually saw the pregnancy, I just felt like I couldn't handle it. What is he even talking about? Wait, what do you mean? So you're saying the marriage itself was for the sake of your career? That's right. You were the type to obediently follow what I said. It was convenient having you around, not just for companionship, but like a housekeeper for my needs, while I still wanted to have my fun. I stared at my husband in disbelief. "But I just can't do the kid thing. I don't want my time taken up by children." I was so shocked I couldn't find the words to respond. I had no idea he was this kind of person. I never imagined his late nights were spent with other women. The memories of what I thought were 2 happy years of marriage suddenly seemed tainted. Well, I did learn that being married helps with social credibility. So I've decided to remarry this one who agrees with me on not wanting kids. Plus, she's prettier than you. With that, my husband pulled the woman closer by the shoulder. "I'll pay you alimony and child support around the standard rate. Just send me the bill or whatever later." "I'm really sorry it's come to this, ma'am," the woman said with a smug look, her apology lacking any sincerity. She probably wanted to see my devastated face. That's why, in front of this woman alone, I refused to let myself cry. The poor baby being born into this. Really so sad. Feeling infuriated by her pitiful gaze directed at my son, I snatched the divorce papers my husband was holding out. "I'll file these myself." Filled with misery, I wanted nothing more than to leave that place as quickly as possible. "I'll send your stuff to your parents' house later. Thanks for everything until now. Bye-bye. Good luck being a single mom." Every word from that irritating woman made me want to punch her, but I silently turned and walked towards the entrance. The cardboard boxes stacked in the Japanese-style room next to the entrance were probably my belongings. They're all set to get rid of me. Holding my baby, I suppressed my frustration and left the familiar apartment behind. Despite my initial fury, by the time I reached my parents' house, I was utterly dejected and emotionless. With a blank expression, I started to explain what had happened, and my parents exploded with emotion on my behalf. "That idiot!" My father's face, red with anger and ready to storm out and confront my husband, was held back by my mother and me. My father's anger was so intense, it seemed unlikely that merely hitting someone would satisfy him. As I tried to hold him back, tears naturally started to fall. Damn it! I was overwhelmed by frustration, sadness, anger, and despair. All the emotions I had been suppressing surged forth, and before I knew it, I found myself crying uncontrollably like a child. It was only when both my parents hugged me and cried with me that I began to regain my composure. I decided to inform my in-laws of the divorce over the phone. It pained my heart, especially since they had been happy about their grandchild's birth at the hospital just the other day. So, if that's what you two have decided, I won't say anything. It's a shame about the grandchild. I'm sorry for what Ken did to you, my mother-in-law apologized. But she did not suggest trying to mend the marriage. Perhaps her son's marriage and his affairs were never truly of concern to my in-laws from the start. Afterward, through a lawyer, I filed for alimony and child support, and the divorce was finalized without issue. The alimony for both of us was transferred in one lump sum by my husband. He probably wanted to settle everything quickly to move on with his remarriage. We agreed on a child support payment of $800 every month, but there was no demand for visitation rights with our son. Realizing he truly had no interest in our child, I felt a clear sense of closure. Thus, our marriage ended unceremoniously after just 2 years. After the divorce, I moved back to my parents' house with my son, Alex. Currently, I'm working as an office worker at a real estate management company nearby, thanks to a referral from my father's acquaintance. According to what my aunt told me, my ex-husband and his affair partner remarried almost immediately after our divorce was finalized. I named our son Alex because in that moment at the hospital, it seemed like the one genuine thing my ex-husband expressed. I hope for a bright future for this child, and even if we never see his father again, I wanted to tell my son that he was loved by his father. A year after the divorce, when I had almost forgotten about him, I received a call from my ex-husband. I hadn't deleted his contact information because of the child support. Sorry to call out of the blue after such a long time. There's something I'd like to talk about. Can we meet? Hearing my ex-husband's voice for the first time in a year, it sounded dark and lifeless, as if he were a different person. Sensing the seriousness of the situation, I agreed to meet him at a cafe near my parents' house after work the next day. Actually, I've been diagnosed with an illness. It's already in a bad state. It's ridiculous that I didn't notice anything wrong with my own body until it got to this point, he said, with a weak smile, leaving me at a loss for words. So I might not be able to provide child support going forward. That's why I want to make our son the beneficiary of my life insurance. I was taken aback by his sudden offer, but I nodded silently to his earnest expression. Leaving a large sum of money to Marissa wouldn't do any good, he muttered under his breath. Driven by curiosity, I couldn't help but ask, "What did you see in her? Was it her looks?" Yeah, that was part of it, but despite appearances, she had her diligent moments. She seemed to understand what men wanted, knew how to reach out where it itched. Though now I realized that was just her way of snagging a man. His response made sense to me. I had never believed he was someone to marry solely based on appearances, but from the way he spoke, it seemed Marissa had outplayed him. Facing death. I've finally had the chance to reflect on my pointless life. The only thing of value I ever did was marrying you and bringing our child into this world in the quiet cafe. Only the sound of him sniffing echoed. I did something terrible to you back then. I'm an idiot for not realizing it until it came to this. I'm truly sorry. This is the only way I can make amends now. I could feel the sincerity in my husband's words. All right, make Alex the beneficiary. He's named Alex. When I nodded, my husband, unconcerned about the onlookers, began to cry out loud. I felt a slight relief knowing that he indeed had a heart. Later we met again to sign and stamp the documents as the legal guardian. While I pitied my husband, I also thought it was divine retribution and felt he deserved it. Even at that moment, half a year later, he informed me that he was going to be hospitalized. A few days after, I decided to take this as a final goodbye and went to visit him with our son. Thinking it might be the last time, my husband was significantly more emaciated than when I last saw him, but he smiled upon seeing Alex. "You've grown so much, Alex, thanks to being taken around by his grandparents." Alex, who wasn't shy around strangers, smiled back at my husband. "I'm really sorry, such a cute kid. I was truly an idiot. It's my karma," as my husband cried, his face scrunched up. Alex gently patted him, comforting him. If only he had realized what was truly important sooner, my husband might have found happiness watching the two of them. The hatred I had for my husband seemed to disappear. However, as I left the hospital room and was descending to the first floor in the elevator, I encountered the last person I wanted to see. "Hey, why are you here?" Marissa was there, wearing those ribbon-adorned high heels. I remembered the humiliation I felt back then, resurfaced from the depths of my heart. "I was informed, so I came to see my son for the last time." Marissa glared at me and Alex with disdain. "Even though you were dumped, don't you ever come back. If you do, I won't let it go." With those parting words, she boarded the elevator we had just exited and went back up. Although it was infuriating, I understood that it wouldn't feel good for an ex-wife and her child to visit unexpectedly. After that incident, I never went to the hospital again, nor did I intend to see them. But then, 3 months later, Marissa unexpectedly showed up at my parents' house. "Sorry for the sudden visit. My husband passed away. I didn't contact you because I didn't want you at the funeral. But since you came to visit him, I thought I should let you know." "Is that so? My condolences." "Thank you for letting me know." Even though I had braced myself for it, the news of my once-beloved husband's death weighed heavily on me. "From now on, please don't contact me or my in-laws again. I never want to see your face again." "Yes, of course. Oh, just one moment, please." I went inside and put $200 into a condolence envelope from a drawer, then handed it to Marissa. "Please use this for flowers." Marissa's face twisted sourly for a moment, but after receiving the envelope, she bowed slightly and left. I thought this marked the complete end of my relationship with my husband. However, a year later, a call from my former mother-in-law entangled us in an unimaginable situation. The phone rang on a day when I was home alone, enjoying my day off. "Hello, is this Linda? Ken's funeral is about to start. You surely don't plan on not coming, do you?" "Excuse me, what are you talking about? Ken has passed away. You were contacted by Marissa yesterday, weren't you?" "I'm coming to pick you up, so be ready and wait at the entrance." 3 years had passed since my divorce from my husband. The sudden call from my mother-in-law, with whom I hadn't been in contact, took me by surprise. Moreover, my ex-husband was supposed to have died a year ago. Confused, I nevertheless changed into mourning clothes and prepared to leave. 30 minutes later, the doorbell rang incessantly. "Come on, we're going. It's outrageous not to attend the funeral of a husband who treated you well, even if you're divorced." "That funeral, you mean the first anniversary, right?" My mother-in-law frowned. "What? The funeral is about to start. Why would it be the first anniversary? Why isn't our conversation aligning?" A year ago, Marissa, my ex-husband's current wife, had personally informed me of his death. I had even handed over a condolence envelope with $200 in it. When I mentioned this, my mother-in-law clicked her tongue quietly, and her frown deepened. "Just get in the car. Where's Alex?" "Alex isn't coming. I don't want him to see Marissa." Without saying anything more, my mother-in-law put me in the passenger seat, and we headed straight for the funeral home. Logically, it's strange to invite an ex-wife who has been separated for several years to a funeral. Between my mother-in-law and Marissa, whose story was true, caught in this unbelievable scenario, I was desperate to know the truth. Upon arriving at the funeral home, a monk had just begun the chanting. The funeral hall was small, indicating a service only for close family members. My husband's portrait was displayed on the altar. It indeed appeared to be my husband's funeral today. Feeling as if I'd been caught in an absurd twist, I couldn't help but let out a rueful smile. The funeral proceeded without issue, and as we waited for the departure of the hearse, Marissa approached me aggressively. "Hey, why are you here? Didn't I tell you never to show your face again? Why are you attending without being invited?" As always, Marissa's way of speaking was infuriating. I was the one who called her. Didn't I tell you that I would contact Linda? What use is your head? I didn't want her here at the funeral, my mother-in-law sighed deeply, frowning. You lied about Ken dying a year ago and even accepted condolence money from Linda. Is there another reason you were so adamant about her not coming? Marissa's face tensed for a moment, and I could hear her swallow hard. Linda, I invited you today because I thought you deserved to say thank you and farewell to Ken, considering how well he treated you. You were taken care of, so it seemed right to express gratitude and see him off. I tilted my head, confused by what my mother-in-law was saying. Despite receiving child support every month, didn't she always demand more? It was clear that Marissa was beginning to panic. Even though it wasn't hot, she was sweating profusely on her forehead. Yes, that's right. Since she was getting child support from him every month, she should pay her respects properly. But look, the funeral is over now, so you can go home. We'll say our goodbyes with just the family. Now come on, it's time for you to leave. Marissa, while making insistent gestures, tried to hurry me out by pushing on my back. Her actions were so unnatural that I started to understand the meaning behind my mother-in-law's frowns and questioning. She must have been suspecting Marissa all along. I shrugged off Marissa's hand and turned squarely to face my mother-in-law. What additional child support? I haven't received anything beyond the agreed amount. I haven't been in contact with him for a long time. My mother-in-law's expression turned thunderous in an instant. So you've been deceiving us all along. You complained about Linda's demands being too high, so I've been sending you $1,000 every month, and you've been pocketing all of it. I never imagined Marissa was exploiting me to extort money from my in-laws. Cornered by my mother-in-law and me, Marissa, realizing she couldn't make excuses, defiantly started to lash out. It's not my fault. He earned a lot, but never let me spend freely. And it seems he had other women until he fell ill. I'm the one who was deceived. My husband did have a good salary from his job at a large corporation, but even when we were married, he only gave me a fixed monthly allowance. I never struggled financially, but his infidelity was undeniable. You could have lived comfortably without your extravagance, couldn't you? Ken said you were a useless money pit. Apparently you hardly did any housework and spent your time gallivanting around. Ah, enough. Be quiet. It's his fault for not letting me have freedom. It's only natural for you in-laws to support me when your daughter-in-law is struggling. Finally, Marissa's true feelings came out. His inheritance rightfully belongs to me, his wife. Now I can finally have my freedom, so don't just invite his ex-wife as you please. The reason Marissa didn't want me at the funeral was all about the inheritance. For Marissa, the idea of my son, my husband's legitimate child, receiving any inheritance was something she desperately wanted to avoid. The relatives waiting for the departure of the hearse were frowning and whispering among themselves. Hearing the commotion, my father-in-law came over and apologized to me. "I'm sorry you got dragged into this mess. I'll get in touch on another day, so it's okay for you to head home now. Thank you for coming." Turning my back on the still arguing mother-in-law and Marissa, I left without waiting for the hearse to depart, feeling entangled in an unfortunate situation. I hoped this would be the end, but I couldn't shake off a bad feeling. Unfortunately, my intuition would prove correct in the coming months. Nearly 3 months later, something unthinkable happened. It was a holiday, and we had gone to a large park with a packed lunch. The park, essentially a vast forest, was bustling with families and couples. Alex, now 3 years old, was energetically tireless, with my parents and me taking turns keeping up with his play. While my dad and I were lying on the leisure sheet, my mom, who had gone with Alex to the playground, came back panicked. "Alex is missing. Hurry up." Alarmed by her frantic demeanor, we all rushed over, but couldn't find Alex around the slide where he had been playing. He slid down once and went back up to slide again, so I waited below, but he never came back down. The large athletic-style slide was crowded with children that day, with kids disappearing inside momentarily. Instead of focusing on the slide, I expanded my view and scanned the surroundings again. Then I spotted Alex's yellow hat as he was walking along a path beyond the playground. It appeared he was being led by a woman I didn't recognize. "Alex!" Hearing my shout, Alex stopped and looked back, and at that moment the woman holding his hand started to run with him in her arms. "Wait!" Before I could start running, my father, who jogs as a hobby, had already sprinted ahead. My heart raced with fear, making it hard to run as I wanted. I called out to my father ahead, "Dad, they're heading towards the parking lot." My father increased his speed and shouted for help. "Someone, please stop that woman. She's kidnapping a child." The woman reached her car, trying to throw Alex into the passenger seat and get into the driver's seat herself, but she was unable to. Several young dads, responding to my father's cries, managed to grab the woman just as she was about to get into the car. "Alex!" After my father took the sobbing Alex out of the passenger seat, he handed him over to me, who had arrived shortly after, relieved. I collapsed to the ground, hugging Alex tightly. "Don't interfere. Because of that kid, I don't get any money. If only he wasn't there. If only he would disappear." The woman was Marissa. Her eyes were bloodshot, and the way she screamed, spitting and raging, was clearly deranged. Trembling, I couldn't say anything back, just watched as the out-of-control Marissa was taken away by the arriving police car. Later, my father-in-law contacted me to apologize and discuss the receipt of my ex-husband's life insurance. It seemed my in-laws had been informed by my husband to proceed in this manner, but they had kept it a secret from Marissa until discussions about the inheritance could be held. Apart from the life insurance, Marissa was to inherit everything else, but it turned out there wasn't much of an estate left. The substantial alimony paid out for our divorcee 3 years prior and the expenses for his illness had left little money. However, there wasn't just one insurance policy, and Marissa must have received a significant sum, at least in the hundreds of thousands. Marissa had been splurging on young hosts. You see, she's always been reckless with money, and it seems she had a considerable amount of debt. She likely used the inheritance to pay off her debts, but it's unclear if she managed to settle them all. My father-in-law sighed deeply, sounding exasperated. More than anything, she couldn't stand knowing the amount of insurance money left for Alex. The insurance money my husband left to Alex was $400,000. It seems Marissa naively believed that if the beneficiary, Alex, were to pass away, the insurance money would automatically go to her. Items such as adhesive tape, rope, and a knife were found in Marissa's car, and during police interrogation, she reportedly confessed to planning to kidnap and kill Alex. Recalling Marissa's deranged look at that moment sends shivers down my spine even now. Perhaps their overbearing love swung from excessive interference to non-interference. We interfered too much in Ken's life out of love. It seems our relationship worsened around the time he went to college, so we learned to keep our opinions to ourselves and respect the decisions of our adult son, they said. But we should have been there for Alex. We should have supported you more. I'm truly sorry, finally, my mother-in-law added. Alex was the name of Ken's childhood friend from a family that respected his own decisions, unlike ours. He's fulfilling his childhood dream of being a pilot now. She dabbed her nose with a handkerchief. So I think Ken wanted Alex to have a life like his friends. Thank you for keeping the name my son suggested for our grandson. There's no doubt that the moment my husband first held our child, he wished for a happy future for him. Just knowing that was more than enough for me. While I can't forgive what my husband did, I no longer harbor any hatred towards him. Considering the future, our family has decided to move to my mother's hometown, which is a plane ride away. It seems Marissa won't be getting out from behind bars anytime soon, but truly, I never want to see her face again. We were dragged into an unbelievable situation, but it brought some clarity. Someday I want to tell Alex, your dad truly wished for your happiness. Moving forward, our family of 4 intends to live happily, respecting each other's decisions.
I had assumed that this new chapter in my life would begin under more favorable conditions, but now it does. My husband, Kevin, has demolished our family home, leaving me standing in front of an empty place where both of my parents once stood. Here, amidst the ruins of my early years, Kevin startlingly disclosed his actual motivations. "What topic are you discussing? Are you crazy? Bring your inheritance to our house now," he yelled. His direct remarks rendered me mute. Still, as the ridiculousness of the scenario struck me, I couldn't hold back my laughter. "Oh, I see. That's what this whole thing was about," I murmured, shaking my head cynically. My spouse Kevin and his parents stared at me in disbelief, not understanding why I would respond the way I did. I took a moment to reintroduce myself, hoping that would clear things up. Brenda is my name. I'm the modest daughter of a dedicated salaried worker from a lowly beginning. When I was 28, I was married to Kevin, and together we raised 3 amazing kids. Now that I'm 50, I had anticipated a calm existence with my spouse, but circumstances had other ideas. I talked about how difficult it was to care for my sick parents, especially my mother's lengthy battle with cancer. Kevin's support was lacking in spite of the toll it took on me, both emotionally and physically. He frequently bemoaned the hardships of sharing my mother's illness, criticizing everything from the cleaning to the food. In the end, we returned to my parents' house so that my mother could receive better care. Kevin continued to be indifferent to her worsening illness throughout this time, which resulted in her being admitted to the hospital and ultimately passing away. It was distressing to see Kevin act so detached during the funeral arrangements. Even during the funeral, when I really needed his support, he remained distant, choosing to sit in the rear with other distant relatives rather than in the family area with me. I had said to him in a whisper, "I wish you would sit with the family," throughout the service. His response was icy and disengaged. "No, I'm not uncomfortable here. After all, I'm not a blood related," he declared. Hearing us talk, his mother interrupted, saying, "He's your spouse, not your mother's son." Here, Kevin is an outsider. Kevin was detached from his family, and his parents echoed him when they said he shouldn't sit in the family area. even while stories and whispers went around among distant relatives about our tense relationship. They argued that, in spite of the evident stress it created, this commitment to custom was justified. Kevin's parents and my brother's family joined us at my house following the funeral. I remained calm and brought them coffee in spite of their previous insensitivity. But what really got me was their comment about how expensive condolence money is, which made it clear how they really felt about the whole thing. The truth of my new life without my parents, and with a partner who seemed more like a stranger than a spouse, dawned forcibly on me as I stood in the rubble of my boyhood home. I forced a grin and exited the room, watching with heavy heart as I overheard bits and pieces of conversation between Kevin and his parents. They were talking, with a hint of derision, about how hard it was to live with me. It wasn't the first time they had behaved disrespectfully. In fact, it had been a recurring topic in our marriage, made especially difficult by the recent death of my mother and the funeral of my father. When I thought back on these times, I saw how little they had bothered and how much I had put up with. It was terrible to see Kevin's disengagement and even his guilt about the living arrangements I had forced upon him. I heard them laughing behind me, berating me for not allowing them to take my mother's possessions. Kevin and his parents stormed out, labeling me an outsider, when I asked that her mementos be divided among our family members, causing a heated confrontation. Following the event, Kevin took a temporary leave of absence. He surprised me by saying he was worried and by giving me and the kids travel vouchers for a vacation. I was surprised by his abrupt change in attitude, but I was also glad. I asked in jest, "I wonder if your father felt guilty," as I took the coupons. Kevin, feeling more laid back than normal, told me to take my time. "Yeah, stay at the kids' places if you like," he said, indicating that he intended to relax at his parents' house while I was away. Following his advice, I visited my son Stephen and daughter Susan before the trip. Seeing them during the time I was taking care of my mother had been challenging. To lessen their everyday difficulties, I spent some time preparing and freezing meals for them. "Mom, you never get to relax, but thank you." "This helps," they both said, appreciative of the home-cooked meals. Thanks to Kevin's unexpected gesture, the trip finally came, and I spent a relaxing time at the hotel with my children. The break seemed to wash away some of the fatigue and sorrow from the months of caregiving and the loss of my parents. After nearly a week, we returned home with renewed spirits and bright smiles. That was fun. "We should thank Dad once in a while," Susan suggested, a sentiment that caught me off guard. "Really, once in a while?" I replied, still unsure about this sudden shift in Kevin's behavior, but willing to acknowledge his effort. This time, I couldn't help but chuckle, albeit with a tinge of suspicion. "But I wonder if he's up to something," I said half-jokingly. Susan quickly dismissed my doubts. "Don't say that. Your father must have had his reasons," she replied confidently. I smiled, planning to return home, share the wonderful memories with Kevin, and perhaps start afresh in our married life. However, the scene that greeted me upon my return left me speechless. "What's going on?" "The house is." My voice trailed off as I took in the sight of where our family home once stood, now shockingly absent. Then Kevin appeared, his parents smirking behind him, their expressions unnervingly gleeful. "Kevin, what's the meaning of this?" I demanded, my confusion turning to anger. Kevin, mirroring his parents' unsettling smiles, responded, "Finally, the baggage is gone. From today, we'll be living with my parents at my house." His words hit me like a cold splash of water. "Why are you talking about this?" I countered, struggling to maintain my composure against Kevin's arrogant declaration. He coldly continued, "Lost your mind? Your family home has been demolished. Come to our house with the inheritance already. Everything you inherited belongs to me. The truth was stark and painful. The disappearance of my house was Kevin's doing, all for inheritance. Despite the overwhelming mix of frustration and sadness, I refused to let Kevin manipulate the situation. No way, I thought to myself and burst into laughter at their smug faces. What? Why are you laughing? What a strange woman. Has she gone mad? My mother-in-law muttered, looking at me as if I were a ghost. Facing them squarely, I declared, "Don't you guys know? I didn't inherit a single penny, so there's no inheritance." My laughter resumed, mocking their greedy assumptions. Kevin, confused and angry, demanded, "What do you mean? Explain yourself." But I chose silence. There was no need to enlighten them further. I'm not going to live with strangers. If you want to live together, do it alone, I said firmly, rejecting his proposal outright. My mother-in-law's anger flared. "You helped with your parents' household, but you won't do ours," she accused. "You know why I did that, right? I agreed to live together, didn't I? But you chose to do so because you didn't want to do housework," I retorted, leaving Kevin and his mother biting their lips in frustration. "And demolishing my family home on your own. There are things you can and can't do." I yelled at them, the betrayal cutting deep. Without another word, I left the scene, Kevin's voice trailing after me. "Where are you going?" But I didn't look back. I needed to secure a place to sleep for the night and couldn't bear to see Kevin's face any longer. Immediately, I consulted a lawyer. It couldn't be that easy to demolish a house, especially one still in my mother's name. Upon investigation, an unbelievable truth came to light. Kevin and my father-in-law had orchestrated the demolition themselves, utilizing acquaintances from my father-in-law's demolition company and renting heavy machinery. They had even given me the travel vouchers to conveniently get me out of the way. The realization of such deceit brought tears to my eyes and filled me with a profound sense of betrayal. Is there any way to punish the three of them? I asked the lawyer through tears, desperate for justice. The lawyer gave me a reassuring smile as he laid out the legal options. Your husband, who demolished the house registered under your mother's name without permission, can be charged with criminal damage and sued for compensation, he explained. Encouraged, I nodded, and he promptly began the legal proceedings. A few days later, an irate call from Kevin interrupted my thoughts. "What's this letter of demand about?" he demanded. "Oh, you received it. Since you destroyed our important house, you'll have to compensate," I replied calmly, despite my rising anger. "Compensate? I told you we were moving into the family home. I demolished an unused house for you. You should be grateful, not demanding compensation. Just bring your inheritance and come back home," Kevin insisted arrogantly, grateful for having our home demolished. "Really?" I scoffed over the phone. "And about the inheritance?" "And coming home. There's none to bring since I didn't inherit anything," I shouted back, my frustration evident. Kevin fell silent, caught off guard by my outburst. The reason I laughed when the house was demolished was because of this. I had a whole year to spend with my mother. It was obvious we would have discussed the inheritance. I told her I don't need anything. Give it all to my brother. Thus, all cash and securities were inherited by my brother. He said that I should get the house since he lived far away and couldn't manage it. If I wasn't going to live there, it could be rented out to someone else. That was the plan for me to inherit the house. Now, either you and your father restore the family home to its original state or pay the amount written in that letter. I'm being kind enough to suggest a settlement. If you can't pay, I'll file a police report and sue you, I spoke firmly. Sorry, I didn't think you'd be so angry, Kevin replied, his tone changing. He began making excuses, suggesting that as long as the family home was there, he couldn't live with his parents, especially since his father had always wanted to live with us. My father-in-law was particularly fond of my son Stephen and had previously expressed a desire to live with him. They had refused to live together back then because it would have made commuting difficult, but his parents seemed to think. I was the one opposed to it. It turns out that Kevin had convinced his parents to agree to this plan by demolishing my family home and making them believe I would move in with the inheritance. This revelation only added to my resolve to see this legal battle through, ensuring that justice was served for the unwarranted destruction of my family home. Even with Kevin's new revelation, forgiveness was far beyond my grasp. Please forgive me. I didn't mean any harm. Dad is remorseful too, Kevin pleaded over the phone. If he's truly remorseful, then he'll agree to the settlement. I responded firmly before hanging up. Despite his continual apologies through calls and messages, insisting he was sorry, I remained steadfast. If you're sorry, then hurry up and transfer the money. I pushed back, knowing well that our beloved family home was beyond restoration, but seeking some form of reparation for the deep hurt caused. In the meantime, I stayed at my brother's place with Susan. My brother, aware of the situation and likely furious about the demolition done without his consent, supported my stance. I won't interfere, but I'll lend a hand. Do what you think is right, Barbara, he encouraged. Everyone around me condemned Kevin's reckless actions and supported me through this ordeal. A month passed with no compensation, and during that time, Kevin ceased all contact. I couldn't impose on Susan's hospitality indefinitely and was eager to secure the promised funds to stabilize my living situation. However, a startling discovery interrupted these plans. One day, Susan, looking at her smartphone, remarked, "This apron looks a lot like Grandma's." She showed me the screen. It was a product page on a flea market app. The item resembled a unique apron I had made for my mother. "What's this?" I asked, shocked. "This is Grandma's apron." "I made it, so there's no mistake," I said. Susan scrolled through other listings, and we found nearly 50 items that unmistakably belonged to my mother. It was clear to me that Kevin was behind this. Furious, I called him immediately. "What's this about the app, Kevin?" I demanded. He sounded annoyed and feigned ignorance. "Don't play dumb. You're selling Mom's belongings, aren't you? Cancel the listings right now," I confronted him. Kevin, sounding panicked, denied everything. "What? No, it's not me," he stammered. Undeterred, I retorted, "Who else would do such a thing? I'm coming over to get everything back." Susan and I drove to Kevin's parents' house. Upon arrival, I called out for Kevin, who met us at the entrance, visibly flustered. "I don't know anything about it," he insisted. Susan, supporting me, pressed him for answers. While this was happening, Kevin's parents, likely aware of our presence, came outside. His mother, seeing Susan, greeted her with a smile, seemingly oblivious to the tension. "Susan, you're here," she said cheerfully. Susan, clearly upset, urged her grandmother to tell Dad to tell the truth. "The truth? It seems like Dad is selling the stuff Grandma passed away with," Susan disclosed. Hearing this, my mother-in-law laughed, dismissing the accusation. Kevin looked increasingly troubled, repeating, "It's not me." Then his mother interjected loudly, "Kevin's selling them. That can't be true." The situation escalated quickly as we confronted the tangled web of deceit, hoping to reclaim what was rightfully ours and uncover the truth behind the distressing sales. The revelation from my mother-in-law left me stunned and drained of color. "But I'm the one selling them," she cheerfully admitted, oblivious to the gravity of her actions. Kevin glanced at his mother with a worried look, clearly aware of the brewing storm. Susan, beside me, was equally shocked, her eyes wide with disbelief. "What did you say?" I managed to utter, struggling to keep my voice steady. My mother-in-law, undeterred, continued to explain her new hobby with a light-hearted air. "It's quite a task, you know. Packaging has to be done carefully, and the photos need to be taken well," she said, treating the whole ordeal as if it were a fun pastime. She seemed completely unaware that she was handling and selling stolen goods. My frustration boiled over, canceled the listing. "That's not something Grandma can just sell," Susan implored, her voice breaking as she tried to reason with her grandmother. But my mother-in-law dismissed her pleas casually. "What's the big deal? I found a fun hobby. I use what I can, and the rest makes a nice little income. It's good for preventing dementia. After all, I'm the only grandma left, and Susan, you want me to stay healthy and live long, right?" she retorted, her tone flippant and dismissive. It was clear she wouldn't listen to our pleas. Realizing that talking would get us nowhere, I took decisive action. "Let's go home, Susan, but first we need to address this properly," I said, pulling a reluctant Susan with me as we left the house and headed straight to the police station. I had not initially planned to involve the police in the house demolition, but theft and unauthorized sale were a different matter entirely. The officers were prompt in their response, and the flea market app company cooperated by suspending my mother-in-law's account, ensuring no more items would be sold. After leaving the police station, I called Kevin. "I had your mother's account suspended. You knew about this, didn't you? You're complicit. Also, I filed a police report. Please cooperate with the investigation," I asserted firmly. Kevin, frantic, tried to plead family ties. "We're family, aren't we? Please withdraw it. Stranger, right? I still haven't received any compensation or damages for the house being demolished, and I see no remorse from you." I countered, my anger evident. Despite my frustrations, I wasn't devoid of compassion. Having shared many years with Kevin, I sighed, acknowledging the long and possibly rocky path ahead in resolving these issues. "I'll wait for the money, but I won't forgive the theft. Everything must be returned. And Kevin, your father looked very ill. Has he been to the hospital?" I inquired, a part of me still concerned for his well-being despite everything. I had seen my father-in-law earlier, and he looked significantly thinner and unwell compared to just a few months ago. It seemed unlikely that the family had even noticed his declining health amidst their other preoccupations. The next day, my father-in-law called not to express gratitude, but to scold me. "You're treating me like a sick person, planning to dump me in a hospital to get rid of me. I have to protect Kevin and your mother." "I'm not going to any hospital," he protested. His response to my genuine concern stung. I apologize if it was out of line. I was just concerned. "I'm not weak and short-lived like your parents. Don't patronize me," he snapped back, his words harsh and dismissive. His reaction only added to the complexity of our already strained relationship, leaving me to navigate these turbulent family dynamics with care and resolve. A few days after our conversation, my father-in-law's health declined significantly, leading him to seek medical attention. The diagnosis was terminal cancer. Kevin, in a state of panic, called me. "Dad has terminal cancer. What should I do?" he asked, his voice laden with anxiety. I responded coolly, remembering past grievances. "That's none of my concern. Remember what you said when I suggested the hospital. You said you're not weak and short-lived like my parents. Deal with it yourself." "How can you be so heartless?" Kevin retorted. "Who's the heartless one? Did you ever say a kind word when my mother was sick?" "Reflect on your actions." I snapped back and ended the call. Sadly, my father-in-law passed away shortly after. As a human being, I didn't want to harbor resentment towards someone who had passed away. But recalling all that had transpired, I found myself unable to mourn him genuinely. After the funeral, a will was discovered. It detailed that the house would be inherited by my grandson Stephen, and the remainder of the estate was to be divided between Kevin's mother and Kevin. I was surprised to see Stephen named in the will. My father-in-law had always favored him, perhaps hoping Stephen would continue to live in the house despite the inheritance potentially being more of a burden due to taxes and maintenance. Stephen was pleased to inherit the house, although I had concerns. It wasn't my place to interfere. Stephen's inheritance proceeded, and my mother-in-law, delighted, paid the inheritance taxes, claiming it was all worth it for her grandson. Despite my mixed feelings about the situation, I didn't say anything further. Then something unexpected happened. Responding to a message from Kevin, I visited his parents' house. Arriving there, I was met with a shocking sight. Heavy machinery and demolition workers were tearing down the house. "It's my house. I can do whatever I want with it, right?" Stephen declared, seemingly unbothered by the destruction. "Stephen, what are you doing? Stop it right now." I cried out, my heart sinking. "Even if I stop now, we can't live there anyway, Mom," Stephen responded calmly. My mother-in-law and Kevin, witnessing the destruction of what was once a significant asset, pleaded with Stephen to stop, but he was resolute. "Have you forgotten what Grandpa and Dad did to Mom? Grandma, you were horrible to her too, right? Did you apologize?" Stephen's tone was sharp, his earlier calmness replaced by a stern demeanor. His words cut deep, and both Kevin and his mother were visibly shaken, kneeling as the machines loudly continued their work. Witnessing the scene, I felt a complex mix of emotions, but ultimately a sense of relief. It seemed that Stephen, in his way, was settling scores and correcting past wrongs against our family. Later, Kevin, having finally received his inheritance, paid the compensation and damages owed to me. Stephen had also managed to recover the stolen items my mother-in-law took from my mother, ensuring their safe return. "Mom, you've got me and Susan," Stephen reassured. Overwhelmed by the support of my children, I finally allowed myself to shed tears of relief. Kevin and his mother, having lost their house and now, with limited resources, moved back into company housing, and their fortunes dramatically reversed. Our greatest asset persisted throughout, and that was the link between Stephen and Susan, which provided love and support to each other, even in the face of hardship. Kevin's mother and him were now the talk of the town. I was contacted by the wife of one of Kevin's coworkers, with whom I am close, following their move back into company housing. Sincerely, I told her the whole backstory. They would have to be thrifty about where they lived in the future, what with Kevin's impending retirement. Although living in corporate housing may not be comfortable for them, they created the circumstance. I occasionally considered asking friends, more out of curiosity and wanting to have a story to tell than anything else, for updates on Kevin and his mother. I kept living with Susan in the interim, but things were about to change. Thanks to the sale of the property where his parents' house formerly stood, Stephen was in a much better financial position and had plans to get married and start a new family. The money from the land had proved to be unexpectedly large, making the house that was torn down shockingly advantageous. Stephen had extended a cordial invitation to move in with him. "Mom, come live with us," and his soon-to-be wife had enthusiastically joined him. Though I knew I couldn't live with Susan forever, I accepted their offer with gratitude. I was resolved to be a mother-in-law who supported and cared for her family without going overboard. I was excited to start a new chapter in my life, one that would be full of love and respect for my growing family.
Growing up in a small town with folks who believed in hard work over anything fancy, I was your typical girl next door, Margie. My family wasn't rich, but we were happy, and they instilled in me the value of hard work from a young age. After college, chasing a slice of independence, I moved to a bigger city, a place that felt like a different world. It was there my life took a turn I never saw coming. I landed a job as a sales manager at a big company, which was a big deal for a small-town girl like me. The job was demanding, but I thrived on the challenge. Unlike my peers who were all about hitting the clubs after work, I was more likely to be found curled up with a book or working overtime. That was until David walked into my life. David was everything I didn't know I was looking for. Charming with a smile that could light up the darkest rooms and a sense of humor that could make anyone laugh. We met through work, and what started as casual coffee breaks turned into long dinners, and before I knew it, I was head over heels. I can't believe how lucky I am, I remember telling him one evening as we walked along the river, the city lights reflecting like stars in the water. Believe it, Margie, you're the best thing that's happened to me, he said, his hand finding mine. It wasn't long before we got married. A simple ceremony, nothing too fancy, just how we liked it. Our daughter Lily came into our lives not long after, and suddenly our little family felt complete. Life was good. David and I found joy in the simple things. We'd take Lily out on weekends with our mobile home, exploring the outskirts of the city, or sometimes just walking in the park, letting her chase the pigeons while we walked hand in hand. But it wasn't all play. Balancing work and family life was tough. After Lily was born, I switched to working half-days to be there for her more. David was supportive, always saying, "Do what you need to, babe. We'll make it work." And we did. We were a team, tackling household chores together, making meals, and taking care of Lily. David's parents were a big help, too. They adored Lily and were always there when we needed a hand. "You two are doing great," David's mom would often say. "It's not easy, but you're making it look like it is." It felt like we had everything figured out, but life has a way of throwing curveballs when you least expect it. One evening, as we were cleaning up after dinner, David mentioned working late more often. "The project's picking up steam, going to need to put in extra hours," he said, almost apologetically. I understood, or at least I tried to. "We'll manage. Just don't work yourself too hard," I replied, trying to keep the worry out of my voice. The shift was gradual, like the slow buildup of clouds before a storm, unnoticed until the downpour is upon you. David's late nights became more frequent, and the warmth that used to fill our home started to cool. I tried to shrug it off, telling myself it was just the stress of his job, but deep down, I knew something was off. Lily started asking more about her dad. "Why isn't Daddy home for dinner?" Her innocent questions were like punches to my gut. "Daddy's gotta work, sweetie. He'll be home soon," I'd say, but the soon stretched longer and longer. One day I got held up at work, something I couldn't avoid. I called David, hoping he could pick up Lily from school. His reaction was like a slap across my face. "What do you mean you're stuck? Can't you see I'm swamped? Handle your own mess," he snapped over the phone before hanging up. Tears stung my eyes, not just from his words, but from the shock of hearing him talk to me like that. I'd never seen this side of him. Panicking, I called his mom. "Hey, it's me. I'm in a bind. Can you grab Lily from school?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. "Of course, dear." "Is everything all right with David?" she replied, concern evident in her voice. "Yeah, just work stuff." "Thanks, I owe you one," I managed, feeling a mix of relief and embarrassment. As days turned into weeks, David's detachment grew. He wasn't just absent physically, but emotionally, too. Our home felt like a house with no life in it. I tried talking to him, reaching out, trying to bridge the gap that kept widening between us. "David, we need to talk. Whatever this is, it's not working. Lily misses you." "I miss you," I said one night, mustering all the courage I had. He barely looked at me, his eyes glued to his phone. "What do you want from me, Margie?" I'm here, aren't I? Just tired, that's all, he muttered, his tone dismissive. But that's just it. You're here, but not really. You don't talk to us, to me. What's going on? I pressed, desperate for any crumb of affection or concern. Nothing's going on. Drop it, he snapped, standing up to leave the room. His indifference was a bitter pill to swallow. I lay awake that night, listening to the silence of our home, a stark contrast to the laughter and love that used to fill it. The change in David wasn't just hurting me, it was affecting Lily too. She became quieter, her bright spark dimming with each day her father pushed us away. It wasn't just the emotional distance. David stopped helping around the house altogether. Tasks we used to share now fell squarely on my shoulders. I felt like a single parent. Why doesn't Daddy play with me anymore? Lily's voice broke through my thoughts one evening as I washed the dishes. I turned to her, forcing a smile. Daddy's just busy, honey. But we can play, what do you say? Your choice of game, I offered, trying to mask the ache in my heart. She nodded, a small smile on her lips, but her eyes were searching, looking for the father she adored and missed. The divide between us grew, and with it, my loneliness. I turned to David's parents for support, spending more time at their place just to feel some connection to the man I married. They noticed the change too, but were at a loss on how to help. It's just a rough patch, dear. Every marriage has them. David's mom tried to reassure me, but her eyes told a different story, one filled with concern and uncertainty. As the days passed, the silence in our home grew louder, a stark reminder of the rift between David and me. I clung to the hope that maybe, just maybe, things could go back to how they were, in a desperate attempt to break through the ice that had formed around us. I planned a surprise. I bought tickets to a local music show, thinking it could reignite the spark we once had. The moment I told David about the surprise, his reaction was far from what I had hoped for. A music show? Seriously, Margie? You know I'm swamped with work. I don't have time for this, he said, barely looking up from his laptop. But it's been ages since we did something as a family. Lily would love it, and I thought it could be a nice break for us together, I replied, trying to keep my voice steady despite the hurt his words caused. Great. Another thing to add to my never-ending to-do list. Thanks, but I'll pass. You two go and have fun, he said dismissively, turning his attention back to his work. I stood there feeling like a fool. The rejection stung, not just because he didn't want to go, but because it felt like he didn't want to spend time with us at all. Lily, sensing the tension, came over and tugged. Weekend, David. This is getting ridiculous. You're never home anymore. Lily keeps asking about you. Look, I don't need this right now, Margie. Work is crazy, and I'm doing the best I can. Maybe if you were a little more understanding instead of constantly nagging, things would be better, he retorted, his words dripping with annoyance. Nagging? I'm trying to have a conversation about our family, about us. You're hardly here, and when you are, you're like a ghost. How is that fair to Lily or me? I shot back, my frustration boiling over. Just leave it, Margie. You wouldn't understand, he said before walking out, leaving me standing there, fuming and feeling more alone than ever. The evenings he claimed to spend with colleagues stretched later and later, and I couldn't shake the feeling that there was something more he wasn't telling me. The loneliness was suffocating, and I found solace in the only place I could, with Lily and David's parents. During one of our dinners at David's parents' house, his mother noticed my subdued mood. Margie, dear, you barely touched your food. Is everything all right? She asked, her voice full of concern. I hesitated, not wanting to burden her with my problems, but the words spilled out. I feel like I'm losing him, and I don't know what to do. He's always working or out, and when he's home, it's like he's not really here. Lily misses him, and I miss my husband. David's father, who had been quietly listening, chimed in. Have you tried talking to him? Really sitting him down and telling him how you feel? I let out a humorless laugh. Talking to David, it's like talking to a wall these days. He doesn't listen, or worse, he gets angry. I'm at my wit's end here. David's increasing late nights and vague excuses pushed me to a decision I never thought I'd make. Hiring a private investigator felt like crossing an invisible line, but the need to understand his actions overshadowed my reservations. Weeks went by with a strange mix of anticipation and dread until the unexpected happened. Our anniversary was approaching, and David surprised me with an invitation to celebrate at an upscale restaurant, promising a weekend together just like old times. I couldn't hide my excitement. "Really, David? Just us, like before?" I asked, hardly believing the shift in his attitude. "Yeah, thought it'd be nice. A break from all the craziness," he replied, his tone casual, almost nonchalant. With renewed hope, I arranged for David's parents to look after Lily, sharing my joyous news. The day arrived with a mix of nerves and excitement. The restaurant was as beautiful as promised, creating a backdrop that felt like a step into our past, a reminder of better days. David was already there, waiting. His gesture of offering me a glass of wine took me by surprise. "Come on, let's celebrate. Just this once," he urged when he saw my hesitation. I laughed, a bit uneasy. "You know I'm not much for drinking, but okay, just this once," I agreed, wanting to make the most of this rare moment between us. The evening was a blur of wine and toasts. David kept filling my glass, each time insisting, "to us." It felt like a dream, our problems momentarily washed away by the ambience and alcohol. But as the night wore on, I felt increasingly unwell, a heaviness dragging me down into a drowsy haze. "David, I don't feel so good. I think I need to lie down," I mumbled, struggling to keep my eyes open. "Don't worry, I got you. Let's get you home," he said, his voice distant as he helped me into the car. The world outside the car window slipped into darkness as I fell into a troubled sleep, only to be jolted awake by a sudden stop. The air was cold, and I was barely conscious when David dragged me out of the car and onto a bench. Through the fog of my mind, I heard his words, sharp and clear, cutting deeper than any knife. "You're just so tiring, Margie. Always there, always expecting so much. I can't do this anymore." His words were a cruel echo in the darkness as I tried to process them, but my body wouldn't cooperate. The world spun, and I felt myself slipping away, his voice the last thing I clung to before darkness claimed me completely. Waking up in the clinic was like trying to piece together a puzzle with half the pieces missing. The pounding in my head matched the confusion swirling through my mind. There, beside me, stood my mother-in-law, her face etched with worry. "You're awake, thank God," she sighed, a hand clutching her heart. "We found you in a bad part of town. No bag, no ID, nothing. What on earth happened?" I tried to sit up, the effort sending waves of nausea through me. I was with David. We had dinner for our anniversary," I managed, the words sounding hollow even to me. Her brows knitted in confusion. "But that can't be. David's been out of town. He called yesterday to check on Lily, said he was sorry he couldn't be here." That didn't make any sense. My head spun, not just from the pain, but from the stark disbelief. "But he was there. We had dinner," I trailed off, the reality sinking in. My own husband's actions were a mystery, his alibi a lie. "Let's get you home. We can sort this out later. How's Lily?" That was the first coherent thought I had. "My daughter, my little girl, was she okay?" "She's fine, dear. Been asking for you. Let's get you better so you can see her," she reassured me, helping me to my feet. The days that followed were a blur of rest and whispered conversations. I stayed with my mother-in-law, the atmosphere charged with unasked questions. Once I felt stronger, I knew what I had to do. I called the detective I had hired weeks ago, the one I hoped would shed light on David's mysterious behavior. "Margie, I have the report. We need to meet." The detective's voice was grave over the phone, promising answers I wasn't sure I was ready for. I met him at a quiet cafe. The envelope he handed me felt like it weighed a ton. "What's in here?" My voice was barely a whisper, fear and anticipation battling within me. "Take your time with it. It's a lot to process, he cautioned, his eyes not hiding his concern. Back at my mother-in-law's house, I braced myself for the worst. The envelope contained photos, receipts, a detailed account of David's comings and goings, evidence of a life I was not a part of, a betrayal laid bare on paper. My hand shook as I absorbed every word, every image. This was the proof of the lie my marriage had become. The man I thought I knew, the life I thought we had built together, it was all a facade. As I drove to the address the detective had given me, my mind was a whirlwind of emotions. Anger, betrayal, but above all, a fierce determination to confront the truth. The evening air felt heavy as I parked outside the nondescript apartment building. With each step towards the door, my resolve hardened. The door was surprisingly unlocked, a foreboding welcome to the scene I was about to witness. Inside, I found them, David and his brightly-haired mistress, lounging as if they owned the world. The shock on David's face upon seeing me was almost satisfying, almost enough to dull the sharp edge of betrayal. "So, this is the hard work that's been keeping you busy every night, huh?" I couldn't keep the bitterness from my voice, nor did I want to. The woman with her pink hair and bright suit just smirked at me, arrogance dripping from every pore. "You shouldn't have come here. It would have been easier for you to just disappear," she sneered, making my blood boil. I turned to David, my heart aching with the betrayal. "How could you do this to me, to us?" I demanded, though a part of me doubted any answer could ease the pain. She laughed, a sound so cold it sent shivers down my spine. "Because you've been in the way of our happiness. We've wanted you gone for a long time," she said, her cruelty cutting deep. But I wasn't there to break. I stood my ground, my voice steady despite the turmoil inside. "I know all about your plans. I'm not here to beg or cry. I've seen the evidence. I know about the poison, and the police do too," I revealed, presenting the evidence I had gathered, the blood tests, the detective's report, the video evidence. Their faces fell, but it was the mistress who recovered first. "You can't prove a thing. You're out of your depth," she hissed, but her bravado couldn't mask the fear in her eyes. I pulled out my phone, showing them the recordings of their plotting. "It's all here. The police have everything they need, and there's more, much more." David tried to speak, but the woman cut him off, still playing the queen of denial. "You think this is over? You think you've won?" she spat, but her words were desperate, the threats empty. I faced them both, my heart heavy but my conscience clear. "This was never about winning or losing. It's about justice. For me, for anyone you might have tried to hurt after me. You won't get away with it." As I left, their stunned silence was a cold comfort. The night air felt sharper somehow as I stepped outside, but I walked away with my head held high. I had confronted the darkest part of my life head on, not with violence or anger, but with the truth. The courtroom was charged with tension, every eye fixed on the drama unfolding. It was the day of reckoning for David and his mistress, the day their fates would be sealed by the weight of their own deceit. Despite their defiant denials, the evidence spoke louder than their lies. As the prosecutor laid out the evidence, it was like reliving the nightmare all over again. First came the restaurant security footage, a silent witness to David slipping something into my glass, a betrayal captured in grainy clarity. Then the city's cameras painted a damning trail, showing David abandoning me in a place no one should ever be alone at night. The final nail in the coffin was the medical reports, undeniable proof of the toxins coursing through my veins, a sinister attempt on my life. David and his mistress sat side by side, a united front in their guilt. Their attempts to brush off the evidence were pathetic, their lies crumbling under the weight of truth. "It's all a misunderstanding," David tried to argue, his voice lacking any conviction. The mistress chimed in, her arrogance undimmed. "That evidence could have been doctored. You have no proof it was us," she sneered, trying to sound confident. But the evidence was irrefutable. The videos, the tests, the detective's thorough investigation, it all pointed to one undeniable conclusion. They were guilty, and justice was about to be served. The judge's gavel was a sound of finality. Based on the overwhelming evidence presented, this court finds the defendants guilty as charged, the judge declared, his voice echoing through the silent courtroom. And then, the financial compensation. It wasn't about the money, not really. It was about accountability, about making them pay in some small way for the havoc they wreaked on my life and my daughter's life. Now, it's a stark contrast to those shadowed days. My daughter and I have found peace, a new beginning forged from the ashes of our past. Our home is filled with laughter and love, a safe haven that once seemed impossible to reclaim. We did it, Mommy. My daughter's words are a balm to my soul, her smile the brightest light in my life. Yes, we did, sweetheart. We're going to be just fine, I assure her. And in my heart, I know it's true. The journey was long and fraught with pain, but standing here now with my daughter by my side, I'm reminded of the strength and resilience that lies within us. We've weathered the storm and emerged stronger, ready to face the future with hope and courage. David's parents, once figures I respected and admired, showed their true colors in the aftermath. They were devastated by their son's actions, heartbroken by the betrayal and harm he caused. The day they decided to cut ties with him and rewrite their will, leaving everything to Lily, my daughter, was a day I'll never forget. I don't know what to say, I managed, my voice choked with emotion. It's what's right. She's our granddaughter, and we love her. We want to make sure she knows she's not defined by her father's mistakes, they replied, a firmness in their tone that left no room for argument. Life since then has been a series of adjustments, of finding our footing in this new reality. I went back to work full-time, diving into my role with a renewed sense of purpose. Balancing work and being a single mom to Lily hasn't been easy, but it's been our life, and it's been good. My mother-in-law, bless her soul, has been a godsend. She stepped up in ways I couldn't have imagined, becoming not just a caregiver for Lily, but a pillar of strength for me. Our bond, forged in the fires of family drama, has become unbreakable. Lily's lucky to have you, you know. We both are, I told her one evening as we shared a quiet cup of tea after putting Lily to bed. She waved me off, her usual modest self. Nonsense. I'm just doing what any grandmother would. Besides, seeing you two happy is all the thanks I need. Our conversations, once filled with the pain and confusion of David's betrayal, now revolve around plans for the future, Lily's latest achievements, and the simple joys of our day-to-day lives. We laugh more, worry less, and cherish the peace that has settled over our home. Lily, growing more each day into a bright and curious young girl, is the light of our lives. She knows she is loved, cherished, and supported not just by me, but by the extended family that rallied around her. Mommy, when I grow up, I want to be strong like you, Lily said to me one night, her words filling my heart with warmth. You already are, my love. You're the strongest person I know, I replied, tucking her in, a sense of contentment settling over me.